It is the Martha Zoller Show, and that's Josh Hawley, who was kind of followed down the hall and yelled at by the Code Pink people who are, the rent protesters. I mean, the only way that you can have these people that are protesting week after week after week after week, day after day after day, they have to be paid. And you see that a lot more on the Democrat side than you do on the Republican side, because generally Republicans have to go home and go to work, and the Democrats are rent protesters. Joining me right now is Roger Gewolb. We talk to him every other week about different issues around the world, and I wanted to get him to chime in today because obviously for the last several months, we've had a lot of turmoil in this country related to border security, aid for Israel, and aid for Ukraine. And the president wanted a bill that just had aid for Ukraine and aid for Israel and no border security. The Republicans want border security included. And on top of all of that, the communication on this aid bill has been poor because what it is a rearming of the U.S. military because the money's already been spent in Ukraine. The weapons have already gone through, so we need to retool our own military, and that's what a lot of this money would have done in the so-called Ukrainian money. It's a shell game, Roger. It's always a shell game. How are you?
I'm very well, Martha. Thank you. Yeah, it's just funny how so much of the narrative and the media don't conflate the two issues of, three issues really. I mean, illegal immigration pouring across the border, both in the UK and the USA, and the question of building up a defense, with the question of money and arms for Ukraine. And especially since I've been talking to some of the very top geopolitical experts that I'm privileged to know. And, Martha, they are saying that it's too late for any further aid or weapons to Ukraine because Zelensky is simply not going to be able to defeat Putin. And Henry Kissinger, whether he was wrong back then, is right now posthumously. Ukraine's just got to give Putin those territories and call a peace, because otherwise it's going to go nowhere. The money and the weapons are going to be wasted, and that is money that could be spent on our own country's defenses and on doing something about immigration.
Well, and for a lot of grassroots Republicans as well as Republicans in office, the idea that we are spending large amounts of money protecting borders in Ukraine and we're spending large amounts of money basically protecting borders in Israel, and we're not spending what we need to spend to protect our own border, they think it's incongruent. And I understand that way of thinking. My bigger problem is that we are weak, meaning the United States is weak on the world stage now. We don't keep our promises. We didn't keep our promise in Afghanistan. We're not keeping our promises in Ukraine. We're not, we're playing this game with Israel of changing the wording every day. And when I say we, I mean, Joe Biden and his administration, but on behalf of the United States. So we look weak. And to the rest of our enemies in the world, whether it's Iran or North Korea or China, it looks like an opportunity for them to do more things that they shouldn't be doing.
Yes, I think you're right. And at the same time, I think you're sort of bringing a bunch of different things together. I would, if I may, like to try to unpick them.
Sure.
First of all, we're looking weak. Let's just stand that issue on its own. I mean, starting with Barack Obama trying to play footsie with the Iranians long ago. I mean, Obama and his avatar, Joe Biden, because I just still call this Obama's third term. I mean, they have given so much away. They have done so much to weaken America. I know a lot of people won't like that, but I'm sorry, it's just my view. Yeah, we are weak, and that's a whole major giant issue. That's just a monster that needs to be addressed. The second issue is Israel. I think Israel is a different thing. Israel is not just about Israel. Israel is about the Jews and persecution of the Jews around the world. That's an issue that affects millions of Jews in America. And, Hamas and their threat to wipe out the Jews needs to be dealt with and needs to be funded. And, of course, the Jews and Israel are just the canary in the mine, because after them, if you listen to Hamas and Islamic Jihad, Christians are next, and then Hindus, and then everybody who's an infidel. Then thirdly, you talk about Ukraine. Well, Ukraine is different. There's no Jews. It's not about Jews. It's not about American power. It is simply a war somewhere else with somebody waging it who is capable of, I wouldn't say Hitler, but my geopolitical friend said more like Mussolini, softer, a Mussolini-like approach to attacking the rest of Europe and building their empire that way. That is, funnily enough, the least of the threats. So I think there should be funding for our military in the UK and the US for Israel to defeat Hamas, get rid of them. And then the question is, is it right to keep sending money and weapons to Ukraine, or is it time for Zelensky to make peace, as my geopolitical friend and more geopolitical people are saying?
Yeah, and it's so interesting because about 15 years ago, through Rotary Club, I'm a Rotarian, we hosted a group of Russian medical executives, doctors, and practitioners that were taking a look at how healthcare was delivered in the United States. And one of the places they came was here. And so we hosted a man who ran a number of medical offices. He was an administrator in our home for about a week. And we had to use Google Translate, and we talked to him for about a week. And it was very interesting, his view of things like Russia breaking up and the end of the USSR, because even though as a business person, he did very well under this new regime, he wanted the old Russian Empire back. He felt that Gorbachev gave everything away and that Putin was strong and loved Russia. And I wondered at the time, and I know that's just one person, that doesn't make it a whole viewpoint, but I wondered at the time how many people actually felt that way, and that did they want to go back to the old way?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, Putin is strong, and they look up to him. And of course, ever since the Tsars, the Russians have always loved a strong leader. I mean, this is why they love Trump. This is why they love Modi in India. People want, and today in this world where we've got the Bidens and the Sunaks and all these wet politicians, as we call them, wet, pretty lame. We want a strong leader. So, Putin has sold the Russian public on the concept of, he is here for the next 10, 15 years to restore Mother Russia to her former glory. And a more unfortunate, there's nothing wrong with that. Great, fine, as long as it doesn't mean imperialism. But what is unfortunate is that he's combined with what they're now calling the Axis partners of Iran, China, North Korea, Yemen, etc., to attack and destroy the, quote, satanic, unquote, values of the West. And that, we're not having. So, but yeah, the Russian people actually think they're from all I can tell, they think they're waging quite a just war, and that we are the aggressors.
So it's going to be, a very interesting few months. The former president was in Atlanta yesterday. He actually was on our airwaves a week ago for our 75th anniversary of our station. And
I know.
He is raising money. He's got a very good campaign structure. This time, of course, I've talked to the folks. They've been around in the business for 40 years. They're letting Trump be Trump, and then they're organizing the rest of the campaign the way his last campaign should have been organized. And I think if the election were held today, he would win, and he would win handily. I do think there's a lot of work that's got to be done between now and then, and I don't think there's going to be any debates, because it doesn't help Joe Biden to debate So he's not going to agree to any.
No, I agree. I mean, I think Trump is doing very well, and I personally feel that Trump is the solution. He is what America needs. Because if we carry on like this with Biden, and out of 300 plus million people, the best they can field is Dean and Marianne. Come on, I mean, if that's all the Dems have got, then I mean, I think Trump is great, and I think he will terrify Putin to a certain degree, and I think he will stabilize the world, and he will, as he did in his first presidency, keep us from World War III. He's absolutely what we need, and I think that's completely obvious. And I think the Republicans are probably right for putting their foot down and saying no money for Ukraine till you fix our border, because money is not unlimited, and we've got a terrible problem. We need our defense boosted, and we need our border flow stopped.
Absolutely. Roger Gewolb, if people want to follow you, how can they do that?
They can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. It's at Dr. Dr. Roger, Roger Gewolb, Gewolb.
Thanks for being with us today.